What if the man who controlled an empire with blood-stained hands decided that a woman who scrubbed his floors was worth more than his birthright? For Brenda Walker, one act of quiet defiance in the penthouse of Seoul's most ruthless crime lord was enough to shatter the chains of tradition and awaken something dangerous in a man who had forgotten what it meant to feel. Brenda never imagined her desperate search for survival in Seoul would lead her through the gates of the House of Shadows, the fortress-like estate where Byung-chul ruled the underworld with precision and terror. To work for him meant risking everything. To catch his attention meant stepping into a world where mercy didn't exist, and emotions were buried beneath layers of cold calculation. But what happens when dignity collides with power, and a woman with nothing left to lose becomes the obsession of a king who refuses to let go? The night air in Seoul was sharp, biting through the thin fabric of Brenda's coat as she stood outside the towering glass and steel penthouse. Neon signs from the streets below flickered like distant stars, painting the sidewalk in shifting shades of electric blue and crimson. She clutched her small suitcase tighter, her knuckles pale against her glowing brown skin. This was it. The last chance before deportation. Before her mother, Victoria's medical bills swallowed what little hope remained. Inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was sterile, cold. The floors gleamed like black ice, polished to a mirror finish. Furniture sat in precise angles, minimalist, expensive, untouched. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for the living. Brenda adjusted the crisp white apron of her maid's uniform, her red and gold box braids pulled back into a tight professional bun. A few rebellious strands framed her face, softening the exhaustion etched into her weary but defiant eyes. She moved through the space quietly, her footsteps barely audible on the marble. Her hands, raw from months of scrubbing floors in cramped guest houses, worked methodically, wiping down surfaces, straightening cushions, erasing any evidence of human presence. This was survival. Invisibility was her armor. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Not the shuffle of a tired man coming home. No, these were deliberate, commanding. Each step echoed through the vast space like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. Brenda didn't turn around. She kept her gaze down, focused on the glass table she was cleaning. But she could feel him. The shift in the air, the weight of his presence pressing against her back like a hand on her throat. Byung-chul. He stood in the archway, framed by shadow and cold light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tall, broad-shouldered, his sharp jawline could have been carved from stone. He wore a tailored black suit that fit like armor, every seam precise, every button fastened. His dark hair was slicked back with ruthless precision, not a strand out of place. But it was his eyes, obsidian, unreadable, reflecting nothing, that made her stomach tighten. He didn't speak. He just watched her. Brenda's grip on the cloth tightened. She had been warned. Che-yi, her only friend in this foreign city, had begged her not to take this job. He's not just dangerous, Brenda. He's the kind of man who makes people disappear. You won't just lose your job if you mess up. You'll lose everything. But Brenda had no choice. Victoria needed medicine. The hospital bills were piling up, and the Korean government had given her 2 weeks before they shipped her back to Tanzania with nothing. So she kept scrubbing. Byung-chul moved closer. His footsteps were silent now, predatory. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, smooth, and carried the weight of absolute authority. You hum when you work. Brenda froze. She hadn't realized. It was a Tanzanian lullaby her mother used to sing, something she did without thinking when her hands were busy and her mind wandered. She swallowed hard, still not looking at him. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb you. Silence. Then, something unexpected. Don't stop. Her head snapped up. Their eyes met for the first time. His expression was unreadable, but there was something flickering beneath the surface. Curiosity, maybe, or hunger. She couldn't tell. Keep humming, he said quietly. It's the first sound in this place that doesn't make me want to burn it down. Brenda blinked, her breath catching. This was not the man Che-yi had described. Or maybe it was. and that made it even more dangerous. He turned and walked toward the window, his silhouette cutting against the Seoul skyline. "You'll stay late tonight. There's more work to be done." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Brenda whispered. As his reflection disappeared into the shadows, she exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled as she resumed cleaning, the lullaby dying on her lips. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, that single exchange, had set something irreversible into motion. In the House of Shadows, where power ruled and blood ran cold, a woman with fire in her veins had just walked into the heart of a storm. And the king who lived there would soon discover that some flames don't die. They burn everything to the ground, including the walls he'd built around his own heart. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated, this story is for you. Have you ever wondered what happens when the most powerful person in the room finally sees you for who you really are? Drop a love if you're ready for a love story where dignity meets danger, and let me know in the comments. Would you risk everything for someone who saw your worth when the world saw nothing? Because this isn't just Brenda's story. It's a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Let's dive into Chapter 1 together. The coffee shop in Itaewon smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams. Brenda sat across from Chae-yi, her friend's manicured nails tapping nervously against the ceramic mug between them. Outside, Seoul moved in its usual frenzy, neon signs flickering to life as dusk settled over the city like a shroud. "You can't be serious," Chae-yi whispered, leaning forward. Her street-style outfit, oversized denim jacket covered in patches, ripped jeans, and chunky white sneakers, stood in stark contrast to Brenda's worn secondhand coat and faded jeans. "Brenda, listen to me. Byung-chul isn't just some rich businessman with a bad temper. He's the Byung-chul, the man who makes entire families disappear when they cross him." Brenda's fingers wrapped around her own mug, seeking warmth she couldn't find. "I don't have a choice, Chae-yi. The immigration office gave me 2 weeks. 2 weeks before they put me on a plane back to Dar es Salaam with nothing. My mother's medical bills are—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forcing the emotion down. "I need this job." "There are other jobs," Chae-yi insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Cleaning offices, working at a cafe, anything but the House of Shadows. That place, people who go in there don't come out the same. Some don't come out at all." Brenda met her friend's eyes. "I've already accepted the position. I start tomorrow." The silence that followed felt like a death sentence. Chae-yi's hand shot across the table, gripping Brenda's wrist. "Then promise me something. Keep your head down. Don't look him in the eye. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, Brenda, don't let him notice you." But it was already too late for that. The penthouse existed in a perpetual state of twilight. Heavy curtains blocked most of the daylight, leaving only thin slices of Seoul's skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Brenda moved through the space like a ghost herself, her footsteps muffled by plush carpets that cost more than she'd earn in a year. Everything was black, white, or chrome. Sharp edges, cold surfaces, no photographs, no personal touches. It was a home designed to feel like nothing, a void where emotions came to die. She learned Byung-chul's patterns quickly. He left before dawn, returned after midnight. Sometimes he didn't return at all. When he was home, he moved through the penthouse like smoke, silent, intangible, present but untouchable. He never raised his voice, never slammed doors. His cruelty, she realized, wasn't loud. It was the quiet kind, the kind that lived in his eyes when he looked at his men, in the way people flinched when he entered a room. But he never looked at her that way. In fact, he barely looked at her at all. Brenda told herself that was good. Invisibility meant safety. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled, polished surfaces until they gleamed, and hummed her mother's lullabies when the silence became too heavy to bear. On the third day, she found a photograph tucked behind a bookshelf while dusting. It showed a younger Byung-chul, maybe 19 or 20, standing beside an older woman in an elaborate hanbok. His face was softer then, almost vulnerable. The woman's hand rested possessively on his shoulder, her expression one of cold pride. Brenda quickly put it back. Some ghosts were better left undisturbed. That night, as she prepared his dinner, he rarely ate, but she made it anyway. She caught her reflection in the polished chrome of the refrigerator. Her box braids were coming loose. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked as hollow as this place felt. "You're still here!" Brenda's heart stopped. She spun around to find Byung-chul standing in the kitchen doorway. He wore his usual black suit, though his tie was loosened and his collar unbuttoned. For the first time, he looked almost human. Yes, sir. I was just finishing. It's past midnight." His obsidian eyes studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You should have left hours ago. The kitchen needed—" "Go home, Brenda." The use of her name startled her. She'd assumed he didn't know it. "Yes, sir," she whispered, untying her apron with trembling fingers. As she gathered her things, she felt his gaze following her. Not predatory, not cruel, something else entirely. Something that felt almost like loneliness. Exhaustion was a living thing, a weight that pressed down on Brenda's bones until she could barely stand. It was 3 a.m, and she'd been scrubbing the kitchen floor for hours, trying to remove a wine stain one of Byung-chul's associates had left during a late-night meeting. Her eyes burned, her hands shook. The bucket of soapy water beside her had gone cold. Just for a moment, she thought. Just close my eyes for one moment. She folded her arms on the cool tile floor and rested her head. The kitchen lights hummed above her, a lullaby of their own. Within seconds, she was asleep. She didn't hear the footsteps, didn't hear the sharp inhale of breath when Byung-chul found her there, curled on his kitchen floor like something broken, her braids spilling around her face, her maid's uniform wrinkled and damp. He stood over her for a long time. His men would have laughed. His mother would have been disgusted. But Byung-chul felt something else entirely, something that terrified him more than any rival gang ever had. He could have woken her, should have. Instead, he shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it carefully over her shoulders. The fabric still held his warmth. When Brenda woke an hour later, disoriented and panicked, she found herself covered in expensive black wool that smelled like cedar and smoke. Her heart hammered as she sat up, clutching the jacket to her chest. Byung-chul was gone. But on the counter beside her sat a glass of water and 2 pain relievers. No note, no explanation. Just an act of unexpected mercy from a man who was supposed to be merciless. The phone calls had stopped. Brenda stared at her cell phone, scrolling through her call history. For weeks, the immigration office had bombarded her with messages, threats, deadlines. But for the past 5 days, nothing. Complete silence. Maybe they made a mistake, she told Chae-yi over video call, though even she didn't believe it. Maybe someone filed the wrong paperwork. Chae-yi's face on the screen looked skeptical. The Korean immigration office doesn't make mistakes, Brenda. Not like this. Then what? I don't know, but be careful. Nothing in this city comes for free. Brenda wanted to argue, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Chae-yi was right. Someone had intervened. Someone powerful enough to make government officials disappear like ghosts. She thought about the jacket, the water, the pain relievers. No, she told herself firmly. It couldn't be him. Men like Byung-chul didn't help people. They used them. But that night, when she heard him return to the penthouse, she found herself standing outside his study door before she could stop herself. Light spilled from beneath it. She could hear him inside, speaking in rapid Korean, his voice low, commanding, absolute. She raised her hand to knock, then lowered it. Whatever he was doing for her, if he was doing anything at all, it came with a price. Everything did. And Brenda wasn't sure she could afford to pay it. She returned to the kitchen and finished cleaning, but sleep didn't come easy that night. The atmosphere in the penthouse changed the moment she arrived. Brenda felt it before she saw anything, a shift in the air, a heaviness that pressed down like a storm about to break. She was in the middle of folding laundry when she heard the voice. Byung-chul! It wasn't a greeting, it was a command. Brenda froze, her hand still on a crisp white shirt. Through the open doorway, she could see into the grand foyer. A woman stood there, draped in silk that cost more than Brenda's entire existence. Her hanbok-inspired dress was a masterpiece of modern design, traditional cuts rendered in expensive fabric that shimmered like oil on water. Her hair was pulled back so severely it stretched her face tight, emphasizing the permanent expression of distaste carved into her features. Byung-chul's mother. Brenda recognized her from the photograph. Older now, but no less formidable. If anything, age had sharpened her into something blade-like. Mother. Byung-chul's voice was carefully neutral as he descended the stairs. He'd been in his study. Brenda could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You didn't call ahead. I don't need to announce myself in my own son's home. The matriarch's eyes swept the space with predatory precision. Then they landed on Brenda. The world stopped. Brenda stood in the doorway, a pile of clean laundry in her arms, her maid's uniform pristine but unable to hide what she was, an outsider, a foreigner, someone who didn't belong in this world of silk and steel. The matriarch's expression curdled. What? She said slowly, each word dripping with venom. Is that doing in your home? Brenda's grip on the laundry tightened. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the walls like she'd learned to do. But something in Byung-chul's posture shifted. His shoulders squared. His obsidian eyes flickered briefly to Brenda, then back to his mother. She works here, he said simply. Works here? The matriarch laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You employ help like this? In the penthouse of a man with your standing? Brenda felt the words like physical blows. She set the laundry down carefully, her hands trembling. She should leave. She should walk away. But her feet wouldn't move. Mother... Don't mother me. The older woman advanced into the room, her silk dress rustling like serpent scales. Do you have any idea what the council will say when they find out you've brought someone like her into your home? The disrespect. The disgrace. Byung-chul's voice dropped to something dangerous. That's enough. But the matriarch was just getting started. She turned her full attention to Brenda now, looking her up and down like examining contaminated meat. What's your name, girl? Brenda's throat felt like sandpaper. Brenda, ma'am. Brenda Walker. Walker, the matriarch sneered. How foreign. Tell me, Brenda, do you understand what kind of man my son is? Do you know the empire he controls? I'm just the maid, ma'am. Just the maid. The matriarch stepped closer, close enough that Brenda could smell her expensive perfume, something floral and suffocating. Then act like it, know your place, and your place is certainly not standing in my presence, like you have any right to breathe the same air. The silence that followed was absolute. Brenda's eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall. She'd survived worse than this. She'd survived poverty, deportation threats, sleeping on floors, scrubbing toilets until her hands bled. She could survive this too. But when she glanced at Byung-chul, what she saw made her breath catch. His obsidian eyes weren't empty anymore. They were burning. The matriarch's lips curved into something cruel as she reached into her designer handbag and withdrew a silk scarf, cream-colored, delicate, worth more than Brenda earned in a month. She let it flutter to the floor at Brenda's feet, then lifted one expensively shod foot. My shoes, she said softly, her voice like poisoned honey. They're dusty from the drive. Clean them. Brenda's breath caught. She could feel every molecule of air in the room crystallize, sharpening into something that cut. Mother? Byung-chul's voice came from somewhere behind her, low and dangerous. Silence. The matriarch didn't even glance at him. Her eyes remained fixed on Brenda like a snake watching its prey. This is between me and the help, unless you've forgotten the hierarchy of this household? Brenda looked down at the silk scarf. Her hands trembled at her sides. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to leave, to protect what little dignity she had left. But she thought of Victoria, her mother in that hospital bed in Dar es Salaam, waiting for money that would never come if Brenda walked away now. She thought of the deportation notice, the empty bank account, the 2 weeks that had somehow, mysteriously, disappeared. Slowly, Brenda knelt. The marble floor was cold against her knees. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears as she reached for the silk scarf. Her fingers closed around the delicate fabric, so soft it felt obscene. The matriarch's smile widened. Good, you're learning your place. Brenda lifted the scarf, brought it toward the woman's shoes. Her whole body shook with the effort of holding back tears, of swallowing the scream building in her throat. This was survival. This was what survival looked like when you had nothing left to bargain with. But just as the silk touched expensive leather, she heard it. Footsteps on the stairs, deliberate, heavy, each one echoing through the foyer like a judge's gavel. Stop! Byung-chul's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The single word carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind of command that made grown men drop to their knees and beg for mercy. Brenda froze, the scarf still in her hands. Byung-chul, his mother said, irritation flickering across her face. I'm handling... I said, stop. He descended the last few stairs and Brenda could see him now in her peripheral vision. His jaw was so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles white. Put down the scarf, Brenda. She didn't move, couldn't move. Fear and shame had turned her muscles to stone. Brenda. His voice softened, just barely. Put it down. The scarf slipped from her fingers, pooling on the marble like spilled cream. The matriarch's expression shifted from triumph to fury in an instant. She whirled on her son, silk dress swirling around her like a storm. How dare you undermine me in front of the help? Have you lost your mind? No. Byung-chul moved past Brenda, positioning himself between her and his mother. I've found it. The matriarch's face went white, then red. You defend her? This stain on everything our family represents? Our family, Byung-chul said quietly, each word precise as a knife blade, built its empire on blood and fear. We took what we wanted and crushed anyone who stood in our way. We called it legacy. We called it honor. He paused, his obsidian eyes meeting his mother's. But all I see when I look at our family is rot dressed in silk. The slap came so fast, Brenda barely saw it. The crack of flesh on flesh echoed through the foyer like a gunshot. Byung-chul's head snapped to the side. A red mark bloomed on his cheek. But he didn't flinch, didn't move. When he turned back to face his mother, his expression was eerily calm. Is that all you have? He asked softly. The matriarch's hand shook. For the first time, Brenda saw something flicker in the older woman's eyes. Uncertainty. Fear. You're choosing her over your own blood? Over everything I've given you? You've given me nothing but chains. Byung-chul's voice remained steady, but something in it had changed. Gone was the cold crime lord. In his place stood something more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. Chains made of guilt and tradition and your endless suffocating expectations. I made you what you are. You made me hollow. The words exploded from him, raw and terrible. You taught me that emotion was weakness, that love was a liability, that the only thing that mattered was power and the appearance of respectability. Well, look at me now, Mother. Look at what your teachings created. A man who lives in a mausoleum and calls it a home. A king with an empire of shadows and not a single person he can trust. The matriarch's face twisted. Then what is she? Some fantasy of redemption? You think this little servant girl can save you? Byung-chul glanced back at Brenda, still kneeling on the floor. When their eyes met, something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. No, he said quietly, turning back to his mother. She doesn't need to save me. She just needs to exist, and that's more than you've ever offered. The matriarch's expression hardened into something terrible. Fine. You want to throw away everything for a moment of rebellion? Then hear me clearly, Byung-chul. She drew herself up to her full height, every inch the Mafia matriarch. You will dispose of this trash, or I will call the council. I will have you removed from your position. I will strip you of everything you've built and hand it to someone more deserving. Someone who understands what it means to lead this family. The ultimatum hung in the air like a blade. Brenda's heart hammered. She should speak, should tell Byung-chul to let her go, that she wasn't worth this, that no job, no amount of money, was worth watching him destroy his life. But before she could open her mouth, Byung-chul moved. He walked past his mother with measured steps, reached the massive double doors that led to the hallway. For one terrible moment, Brenda thought he was opening them for her, that he'd made his choice, and she was the one being thrown out. But then he turned, walked back to his mother, and grabbed her arm. What are you? The matriarch's words cut off in a gasp as Byung-chul forcibly walked her toward the doors. Not roughly, he was still her son, but with unmistakable determination. You want to talk about trash? Byung-chul's voice was soft, almost gentle. Let me show you where it belongs. He pushed his mother, the woman who had birthed him, raised him, molded him into the weapon he'd become, into the hallway outside his penthouse. Byung-chul! She spun around, shock and fury warring on her face. You can't. I can. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light of his home. And I am. You're no longer welcome here, Mother. Not in my home, not in my life, not anywhere near the woman I've chosen. The council will let them come. A cold smile touched his lips, the smile that made rivals surrender without a fight. I've been preparing for this moment longer than you know. The council answers to me now. Not you, not the old guard. Me. And if they have a problem with that, they're welcome to challenge me. You know how those challenges end. The matriarch's face went ashen. You would really choose her over everything? Byung-chul's eyes softened, just for a moment. I'm choosing myself, Mother. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want. And I want her. Before she could respond, he stepped back and slammed the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed through the penthouse like a death knell. Silence fell, thick, heavy, absolute. Brenda worked mechanically, folding her few possessions into the battered suitcase she'd arrived with. Her hands moved on autopilot while her mind spun in circles. She'd caused this. She'd destroyed everything he'd built. The moment his mother told the council what had happened, Byung-chul would face consequences she couldn't even imagine. She had to leave. Tonight, before she caused any more damage. Her fingers fumbled with the zipper when she heard the knock. Brenda! His voice came through the door, tired, raw, human. May I come in? She didn't trust herself to speak, so she opened the door. Byung-chul stood in the hallway of the servants' quarters, a place she knew he'd never visited before. He'd removed his suit jacket. His tie was gone. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked at the suitcase on her bed. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or fear. You're leaving. It wasn't a question. I have to, Brenda whispered. What happened tonight? I can't let you lose everything because of me. Everything? Byung-chul stepped into the small room, and suddenly the space felt impossibly tiny. Brenda, before you came here, I had nothing. An empire built on blood. A home that felt like a tomb. Respect born from fear and nothing else. You call that everything? It's your life. It wasn't a life. His obsidian eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw them clearly. Not empty, not cold, but full of something that made her breath catch. It was existence, survival, going through motions because I didn't know there was any other way to be. And then you came here, humming your mother's songs while you cleaned my floors, and I remembered what it felt like to be human. Tears burned Brenda's eyes. You can't throw away everything for what? For you? He moved closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke, could see the slight tremor in his hands. Brenda, you're not taking anything from me. You're giving me a chance to build something real, something that isn't soaked in blood and tradition and my mother's expectations. The council is mine. His voice hardened. I've been consolidating power for 3 years. The old guard doesn't control me anymore. My mother just didn't want to believe it. He paused, vulnerability flickering across his face. But none of that matters if you walk out that door. I can control the council. I can manage the empire, but I can't force you to stay. Brenda's hands trembled. Why me? I'm just... Don't. The word was sharp. Don't call yourself just anything. You're the woman who stood up to me when my own men trembled, who maintained dignity when my mother tried to strip it away, who hums lullabies in a house that had forgotten what music sounds like. His voice softened. You're Brenda Walker, and if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to kneel for anyone again. The tears spilled over. I don't understand what's happening. Neither do I, Byung-chul admitted. But for the first time in my life, I don't want to understand it. I just want to feel it. The grand foyer looked different in the aftermath. Brenda stood at its center, suitcase abandoned in the servants' quarters, her heart hammering as Byung-chul approached. The penthouse was silent. His guards dismissed, the staff sent home. Just the two of them in this vast space that had witnessed so much. And then he knelt. Byung-chul, the man who made crime lords bow, who controlled Seoul's underworld with iron precision, dropped to one knee in front of her. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Inside was a ring, not flashy or ostentatious, but elegant. A single diamond set in platinum, simple and perfect. I'm not good at this, he said quietly, looking up at her. I don't know how to be soft or romantic or any of the things you probably deserve. But I know this. From the moment you walked into my home, everything changed. You didn't fix me. I'm still broken in ways I don't fully understand. But you made me want to try. To be more than what I was raised to be. Brenda's hands covered her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. I'm offering you more than marriage, Byung-chul continued. I'm offering you my empire, my name, my protection. Every person in this city will know that an insult to you is a declaration of war against me. You won't be my wife in the shadows. You'll stand beside me as my equal, my queen. Byung-chul, I know I'm asking for too much, he said quickly. I know you have every reason to walk away, but if you stay, I promise you this. Your mother will have the best medical care money can buy. Your visa will never be an issue again. And no one, not my mother, not the council, not anyone, will ever make you feel less than the extraordinary woman you are. Brenda knelt too, bringing herself level with him. Her hands cupped his face, feeling the warmth of his skin, the reality of him. You're not broken, she whispered. You're just finally allowing yourself to feel. And yes, I'll stay. Not for the empire or the protection or the security, though I won't pretend those things don't matter. I'll stay, because when I look at you, I see someone who's been suffocating his whole life and is finally learning to breathe. Byung-chul's breath shuddered out of him. He slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her close. For a long moment, they knelt there together in the foyer where his mother had tried to destroy her, where he'd shut the door on his past. I don't know how to do this, he admitted against her hair. How to be... happy. Brenda pulled back to look at him, a small smile breaking through her tears. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. Outside, Seoul hummed with life, neon lights flickering, the underworld churning with whispers about what had happened in the House of Shadows. The council would talk, rivals would test him, his mother would plot her revenge. But inside the penthouse, the ghost and the maid who had hummed songs in the darkness found something neither had believed possible. A chance to build a kingdom not on blood and fear, but on choice. On fire and steel forged together into something unbreakable. And when dawn broke over Seoul the next morning, it rose on a new empire. One where a Tanzanian woman who'd once scrubbed floors now wore the crown, and the man who'd lived in shadows finally stepped into the light. Not because she saved him, but because together they saved each other.